Welcome to DevCast. I'm Georgia, and today I'll be joined by Dominic Richards, co-founder and chair of Our Place. In this episode, we'll explore Dominic's background, his work with the King's Foundation, and what it's really like to build a truly sustainable community. Well, welcome, Dominic. Thanks for joining us. We're going to jump straight in, if that's all right.
My pleasure.
I think the first thing most people are going to be particularly interested in is, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you ended up in property?
Yes. I grew up in Australia and I came to the UK to go to university. And while I was at university, I sold teddy bears in the summer holidays because Australia was so far away. Started a teddy bear company, and then after that, growing to a certain size, I went and did a year's course at the Prince of Wales's Institute of Architecture. And I was in my first lecture, and I fell completely in love with the subject of sustainable property, like a lightning bolt. I thought, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life.
Nice.
But all I really know about is teddy bears.
Teddy bears in your developments. And so university. What happened? Give us the story then. What happened post that, and how have you got to where you've got to?
So when I was at the Prince of Wales Institute of Architecture, what was phenomenal about that course was a very intense year course where you were thrown into the deep end in so many different subject areas. So one day you would be removing concrete off a building in the driving rain in Scotland, and then mixing lime and re-rendering it with a breathable material. The next day, you'd be learning about master planning new sustainable communities. The next day, you'd be learning how to paint. Then you'd be wood carving. Then you'd be building walls. I mean, it was just a very, of a sort of a Renaissance school of architecture and design. And it was just a very good preparation for understanding what needs to go into creating great places.
And why do you think, appreciate sometimes, things pick us, but why do you think sustainability was so interesting? Why were you so passionate about that and so interested in that?
Well, I mean, from the influences in my life and the teaching that I've had, really.
Yeah.
I remember growing up as a teenager in Australia, watching the then Prince of Wales be lampooned for all his ideas of plastics in the ocean, or sustainable agriculture, or nurturing communities, etc. And I remember thinking, just as a teenager, well, it kind of makes sense to me. It just feels like a healthy way of creating a harmonious society. And so I was inspired by His Royal Highness's philosophy, but not understanding that I would ever be as engaged as I am.
Yeah.
So when I got to the Prince of Wales Institute of Architecture, it just had the best practitioners in so many fields. It was a complete luxury to be taught by so many people at the peak of their powers.
Yeah. And how did Our Place come about then? How did that commence, and what's the story there?
So I co-founded Our Place about 8 or 9 years ago, as a way of taking the philosophy of what's now the King's Foundation into the commercial sphere, and getting as many significant built projects done as possible. And the goal of Our Place is to build sustainable, beautiful places which reflect local identity, are walkable, and allow the whole of society to flourish.
How do you find, obviously, the ethos of the business and is, I think, one that lots of people talk about but not necessarily actually deliver on. How do you find, particularly in London now, I guess, with the way the world is, how do you find being able to do that whilst also making it viable and ensuring that, a profit is made? I guess it's a business at the end of the day. I
think you touched on something interesting there, because in the 30 years that I've been involved both charitably and now commercially, almost everybody now speaks the same language about sustainability, but in many respects it's business as usual behind. I mean, I have been known to shout out at the latest advert from a major bank that was doing naughty things during the financial crisis, now telling you it's being with you forever and it's here to make society better. And it just feels, so often it feels like greenwashing, and people just going with a trend. And that can be quite infuriating, because suddenly the things that you were talking about, which have great you've in some respects faced a lot of opposition to, and now the mainstream, and you worry that you're now part of the greenwashing movement.
Yes, yeah.
But the other half to answer your question is that unless it is commercially viable, it's a vanity project.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in vanity projects. I'm interested in people doing very well, but also contributing to society.
Yeah.
I don't have anything against people flourishing and making money and being successful. But I do like the outcome of that. Call me old-fashioned, but the idea that you are in service to people and you're providing services and you're leaving the world a better place and you get rewarded for doing that work.
Yeah, rather than, no, completely. And what's kind of the vision for the business? What's the goals, and where do you see the next?
Well, before I die, I just like to build as many places as possible that enable communities to flourish. Different income groups living together, different age groups living together, nature at the heart, walkability, local identity, places where you feel like you have a sense of belonging, places that nurture you, healthy places, etc., etc., etc. I just want to get as many of those places built as possible. And I hope that through us showing how you can make money and do things that you're proud of and leave a legacy, that many, many more people will feel encouraged to do it, basically.
And what's been, I'm not allowed to ask this, like asking what's your favourite child, but what's been your favourite project that you've been involved in so far?
Well, we're currently sitting in Spitalfields, which is close to my heart. I moved to Spitalfields in the 90s from Notting Hill.
Yeah.
And all my friends from West London says, we'll never come and visit you. Are you mad? Are you completely mad? And of course, now Spitalfields is sort of the Mayfair of the East.
Yeah.
And so nobody thinks that way anymore. But I do like the idea of watching an area that's been, has suffered from a lack of investment and is in difficult situations being invested into appropriately. And this street that we're on at the moment was a derelict street. And I used to walk past it every day for like 20 years. And then it became available and I saw what was being proposed for it. And one of the problems with these inner city areas, they become victims of their own success. So for example, people will move into an area for the very character of what the place is about. And then you have an existing community that's there. And as it gets more valuable, it becomes less and less like the place that you first fell in love with. And what I was worried about was that there was a kind of Canary Wharfization occurring of Spitalfields. And this street was going to be a really boring landscaper. It didn't reflect Spitalfields whatsoever. And you kind of think, well, if you're investing in Spitalfields, you want to live in Spitalfields, don't you want to live in Spitalfields? You don't want to live in something that could be Reading, Glasgow, outskirts of Sydney or whatever. And there's this horrible trend towards nowhere places that I think we find quite alienating. And a sense of identity and belonging is so important. So that's a long preamble to, I'm very pleased with this street, even more so because a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine was phoning me from the street saying, I'm trying to find your development, but I cannot find it. I've been up and down Toynbee Street, but it is not here. I said, can you see a yellow door and a green door and a red door? I said, yes, but that's been there forever. Job done.
Yeah.
It's not about me, in that egocentric male way of saying, this is what I built. This is me making my contribution. This is us as a company responding to what is special about whatever area we're in, and hopefully just integrating and fitting in such that it's as lighter thing. And in fact, what's interesting about this development is it's much higher density in terms of heights and gross development value than what we bought it with permission for. And there was a huge amount of opposition to the original landscape and nowhere scheme, but no opposition to us whatsoever, because people appreciated that we were trying to respect the character of Spitalfields. And now it's a booming street. It's just got a lovely vibe about it, and it's exciting to do that. So I think I fall in love with each of my projects, and I'm almost fall completely absolutely in love with something, and then when it's over, when it's finished, it's like next kind of thing. I'm a serial monogamist when it comes to property. So I'm now deeply in love with what we're doing in Norwich, which is a different approach suiting Norwich. But this is a good one at the moment to be proud of.
Yeah, definitely. What's the biggest challenge you face then when looking at a scheme and wanting to do it in the way that you've spoken about? What's normally the biggest challenge you come up against?
The biggest challenge in this whole society is planning, without a doubt. And the last government was amongst the worst governments I've ever seen in this subject matter. And the reason why I'm slightly exercised about the last Conservative government is that they destroyed so much of this country, in my opinion, by holding back good development. And they did so whilst knowing what to do. So it was not ignorance that had them make a mistake, which I can be more forgiving of.
Yeah.
They had so many white papers. They understand about sustainable development. They understand about mixed uses. They understand about local identity. And all they did was talk about it and then row back and row back and row back. So by the time the current government inherited the situation, things were much worse than 14 years ago. Yeah. And, I was recently at an Octopus, which is a phenomenal company. I just love their culture. But I was at an Octopus as part of Climate Week in London, and they had a man from Ukraine there who runs the energy system in Ukraine. What they were talking about was the fact that as Putin sends missiles and tries to destroy their infrastructure, one of the ways they're having to deal with it is to no longer have centralized provision of power, but to have more solar and wind generation of energy and having microgrids so that you effectively you can't take out the whole of a town or region. And they were talking about how when this horrible war is over, inshallah, they will have probably the best electric and most modern system in Europe, and they get consents to do these in wartime to get these new gigabyte microgrid set up, which in comparison in England takes 16 years.
Wow.
And it's just that lack of support during the last government that's left us in such a bad situation. And the new government seems to be very alive to that. And I wish them best of luck with what they're trying to achieve, because we do need reform of the planning system. But we also need to reform the planning system such that we support good development.
100%.
It's not just about a free-for-all.
How do we get as much as possible?
Because we've done that before. We've created ghettos of poverty and lack of ambition through badly maintained concrete buildings that become places of despair. We can't it's not just about numbers. I would like to see the planning system adjusted such that if you meet certain criteria, you go through more easily, and if you don't, you face these problems, which would encourage people to be more sustainable.
What do you think, if there was one thing that the government could do to alter the planning system that you think would have the best impact possible fastest, what would you say that is?
It would be the prioritization of entirely new settlements, appropriately located with a very strong guiding principles about what they should be, i.e. they should be net zero new settlements, they should have a certain percentage of employment, they should have education, they should have healthcare, they should have nature, they should have homes for the young and the elderly, they should have pepper-potted social housing. There should be a whole criteria, and this has been achieved in places like Poundbury and Lansleden. There should be a whole set of criteria that if the system encouraged that and made it easy that, I bet a lot of volume house builders would also gravitate towards that. Whilst it remains easier to add a certain number of executive homes onto the edge of any village or town or whatever that looks like anywhere else in the country, without the infrastructure, you're going to not only be undervaluing the existing settlements where you are, but you're also going to be adding stress to existing infrastructure. So my biggest thing would be, let's promote the idea of beautiful, sustainable, walkable, traditional towns, embracing the future and all the technology that comes with sustainability.
And so what's your, slightly turning point, but what's your connection with the King's Foundation and Prince of Wales Architecture then?
Well, the Prince of Wales Institute of Architecture was the school that was the first iteration of His Majesty's ideas in this space. Then that became part of the Prince's Foundation, which I was the trustee of. And then there was a variety of initiatives, Prince's Foundation for the Built Environment, Building Community, which I was also a trustee of. And that has now become the King's Foundation, which incorporates the regeneration through heritage projects like Dumfries House, the Highgrove Gardens, Castle of May, etc., alongside championing sustainable urbanism principles. So I've been a trustee of various iterations of that, and I'm also on the board of the King's Trust Australia, which I adore because I just love seeing the impact of giving people a chance where they haven't otherwise been invested in.
Yeah.
And I am the chair of the King's Foundation Australia, where we are bringing support to Australians who are committed to sustainable urbanism, regeneration through heritage, and crafts and skills training in Australia.
Oh, fascinating. When I left the office today, everyone was saying to me, I hear you're doing a podcast with a friend of the King.
Well, they weren't accurate. I massively respect and am inspired by His Majesty.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate for the last 30 years to have been able to assist charitably in various ways to his campaigns. But no, I mean, the last thing I would describe myself as a friend of His Majesty.
I'll clarify that when I go back. Thank you. Lots of people, lots of people use the word sustainable. We've sort of spoken about this a bit earlier. It's a real buzzword. Everybody says it.
Wow.
What does it actually mean to you?
It's difficult because it's almost become part of culture wars, the word sustainable as well. And so I suppose how I could illustrate this. Okay, let's say we built the most perfect Teletubbies houses that grew out of the earth, that required hardly any energy whatsoever, and which had all this eco bling to make them work, etc. And then you had to get in your car to go and buy a pint of milk. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't care that your house was so sustainable, had all the eco bling and what have you. If you're not part of a vibrant, walkable community and you're having to get in a car to go to a out-of-town supermarket, or you need to go in a car to go to your place of work, or sustainability has to be a ecosystem, and you have to look at it from total. So, for example, if you built a new town out of less sustainable materials, but you're encouraging fewer vehicular transport arrangements, you had walkability, you had places of work, you had schools, you had doctor surgeries, you had your homes, etc., and it would be more sustainable if you built that out of less sustainable materials than building the most perfect sustainable building out of adobe bricks and the outskirts, whatever. Of course, you want to then take that principle and incorporate more and more sustainable materials and ways of being as well. Yeah. But you have to start with the master plan, the structure, and the way that people live for sustainability. And you have to build in, non-privatized, shared forms of transport. And then you start to think about, and what are the alternative ways that we can generate energy.
I'm hearing sort of this living sustainably rather than building sustainably, more so. The focus on living sustainably rather than necessarily building sustainably. Am I hearing that right?
Well, you're still building sustainably, but you are looking at sustainability in the round.
Yeah.
You're not just focusing on the U values of one particular material. Of course, we want to use the most efficient, sustainable materials we can, but those are add-ons to the fundamental approach to sustainability, which is creating places where people are able to live as harmoniously as possible with nature at the heart in walkable neighborhoods. That's your starting point. So an eco-bling glass and steel town that is all spread out, land hungry, and is all about roads and traffic is not my idea of sustainability.
No. And so then, if you were to, if there was a developer who was building traditional housing estates, wanted to really push and become more sustainable or build more truly sustainable projects, what would your biggest bit of advice be to them?
Well, I think the thing is that it's very difficult to achieve these levels of interconnectivity when you are doing small-scale development. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing 50 to 200 houses, you're hardly likely to be able to support squares, schools, doctor surgeries, etc. So I would say that the first thing is that you need to be able to do things at scale so you can create the infrastructure. But of course, one of the issues is we live in such a short-term environment that it's very difficult for people to, both in terms of the planning system and also in terms of patient capital and stuff, to be able to take the long-term legacy view. But if we don't take a long-term legacy view of placemaking and structure planning permissions and finance and all those things around it, we are really heading to hell in a handcart, because we can't just do these small add-on unsustainable executive home developments everywhere. So if that's your speciality at the moment, if the planning system was encouraging you to do larger schemes and was supporting you, and the systems the government is now announcing about banks to help SMEs, etc. We need the direction of travel to be encouraged in that way. You're going to be very difficult for you to achieve the kind of places I'm talking about unless you're able to do it at scale and take a 10 to 20 year program rather than a 3-year program.
Rather than a short-term flip. You spoke, I think you mentioned Octopus, but I read about your partnership with Octopus Energy. It sounds incredible. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, because we can design from the ground up with Octopus by making sure that every home that we build has solar power, battery storage, a heat pump, and then electric car charging. It goes both ways. So you can basically use your electric car battery off peak as a storage item, as well as charging it off peak. Through their clever algorithms, what they do, they can guarantee that nobody who rents or buys in our new town of Kingswood will have any energy bills whatsoever for a minimum of 10 years. So no heating bills, no hot water bills, no lighting bills, no nothing. Can you imagine what that would do psychologically for somebody to know that you don't have to think every time about the cost of energy?
Of course. And
also, given that it's been renewably created as well, you don't have to feel that you're also burning fossil fuels for your energy as well. So it's a new world. At the moment, we're all in a world of scarcity. And for me, psychologically, the idea that you can destroy... Fuel poverty doesn't exist in that scenario. And people have the freedom to use energy as they wish. So that's the partnership that we're doing with Octopus. And, they still are able to make money because they cleverly manage the grid and export and import and whatever at different times during the day. And we can set that up because we are building from scratch.
Brilliant. That sounds, really interesting. How do you... when you're putting together these communities, you talk a lot around the younger generation and the older generation living together and I guess there being a community feel. How do you ensure that what you're wanting to deliver and do deliver is what they want and somewhere that they want to live?
Obviously, if you don't provide what the customer wants,
they're not
you're in trouble. I think we've had a little bit of a one-size-fits-all solution to new houses. You often go and see these estates and they're all 4 or 5 bedroom houses with a certain amount of space around them and a place for the car. And that may well suit you for a period of your life when you've got children living at home. But if we're all lucky enough to live a decent lifespan, that's only a small part of your actual life. And so what is it like when you're a single person, or you are a young couple without children, or the children have flown the nest, or you're older, etc.? Generally, those larger executive home properties, which are dependent upon cars, are not really suitable for a whole range of things. So actually, that type of monocultural development doesn't actually reflect society anyhow. And in terms of business risk, if you're creating a place where that part of one's life is catered for, but also younger people, single, young couples, older single people, you have to reflect society, and you're going to have much less risk, I would suggest, in your new town or new settlement if you're catering for a wider audience.
What's been your most challenging scheme to date?
Our most challenging scheme to date is the building of a new town in Sussex called Kingswood. Why? Because of the planning process.
Okay.
And we own the land because we're legacy landowners. We are not, what are they called? Speculators that deal in land, get consents and sell them on.
Okay.
We're not that. Promoters, that's right. We're not promoters. We are legacy landowners that want to be proud of the legacy that we leave behind us. So therefore, as the owners of a piece of land in Sussex, we are promoting a sustainable mixed-use new community. And there's been various political parties in control of Horsham District Council, and there's been a need to create a new plan. And I've been watching what I consider to be a slow car crash of the plan coming, and I have been collaborating and cooperating as much as possible through multiple iterations of political control of the council, etc. And what I was been trying to warn about is that the King's Foundation has a really good program called BIMBY. So we all know about NIMBY. And I've got a lot of sympathy for NIMBYs because when you see so much rubbish being thrown up that doesn't add to your community but detracts from it, you become concerned about any form of development.
Of course, yeah.
The thing is that what the King's Foundation BIMBY program does, it's called Beauty in My Backyard as opposed to Not in My Backyard. And it's about empowering people to actually look at what they might like to see rather than complaining about what they don't want. And unfortunately, in this society, it all seems about stopping rather than enabling what we want. And given the great need for housing, I mean, in Horsham, for example, there's some statistics which are horrifying, which is that the average wage in the district, to buy a house, you need to have 14 times your salary, the average salary.
Jeez.
So no wonder there are so many people living in substandard accommodation. No wonder there's so many young people who can't live in the area that they grew up in. And do we think that everyday people want to stop people from having an affordable home? No. But the system seems to be about stopping everything. That's because there's a lack of trust, and I understand why. But I remember saying repeatedly that if they try and resist the housing that's required in that district, their plan will be found unsound, and it'd be much better if they worked with the kind of sustainable new net zero carbon settlement that we're providing that brings in new infrastructure and services so that the plan is regarded as sound, and they have, most importantly, control over where things happen. That was all ignored. They cut back the numbers as much as possible. There were all these articles in the paper about how we'd beat Angela Rayner's at her own game. We're avoiding housing targets, et cetera, which is all rubbish. And it's politics. It's not the reality. You know, I have no political affiliation whatsoever. I genuinely don't. And I voted every which way that I ever have in my life. But I do care about communities flourishing and people having homes they can afford. 100%. I'll support any party that is prepared to tackle those thorny issues. But losing the opportunity to contribute meaningfully to what housing and what development looks like is lost if you lose control of the local plan process. So the local plan process was taken through examination. Of course, as I expected, the inspector threw the plan out. The result being there's now no plan, and there are a lot of people now putting in speculative developments for this. The council is having to hire more planning officers to deal with all the speculative stuff coming. Whereas if they'd included my new town in the plan, then the plan would have been sound, and there would have been more control on what went there, and there could have been an exemplar new settlement as a way of dealing with the housing crisis in both sustainable and exemplar fashion. And it's just infuriating to watch this slow car crash. I won't give names, but there was one MP that I went to see about a project, and I walked in and he treated me like the Antichrist at the beginning. And by the end of the conversation, it was like, oh, okay, right. You are the right people with the right solution to this particular problem, but will you please do it in a neighbouring constituency because I don't want the hassle. And to me, what upsets me about that is that shows absolutely profound lack of leadership. And what we require is leadership. And leadership is often about taking the difficult decisions. So being able to say, well, okay, you might not want any houses in Sussex whatsoever ever again, but I'm afraid we cannot bury our heads in the sand. These are coming. So therefore, I suggest that we therefore show leadership by supporting sustainable development, and we get some control over what happens here before we lose control of the process. That would be unpopular with a certain amount of the electorate. But I happen to think that, you know, people are much cleverer than politicians give them credit for sometimes. I think that people are open to persuasion and respect leadership. I certainly will much respect someone that shows leadership and has a philosophy and has a goal, even if I don't necessarily agree with it.
Yeah,
what I don't like is people thinking, right, how will this affect us at the next election? Yeah. And the Conservatives were really worried about this and got very concerned after a Liberal Democrat win, I can't even remember where, and it was linked to planning.
Yeah.
And then after that, there was even more backtracking on numbers and this and that, what have you. Did it save them? No. But I think that if they had have been part of a government that had really promoted sustainable, beautiful new places that enabled young people to not be spending stupid amounts of their net income on rent or being able to buy their first place in an affordable way, et cetera, that they wouldn't have had a group of people that would have voted for them. Yeah. And I kind of, that lack of leadership is there. So the most difficult subject that I have at the moment has been trying to convince people that we should be seasonable by the horns, building a new settlement, etc. Let's be clear. If no more housing was coming to this country ever in the future, I'd exit the conversation and have an easy life. I've got lots of things I can do in my life, lots of things. But given that I know that's not the case, it would be remiss of me to not at least try and get the kind of places that I've been trained in and educated in as having better outcomes for the whole of society.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think I think we're crying out for some leadership as well. I think you're right. I think people want it and people like it over and above actually agreeing with others. Wholeheartedly agree with you on that one. Let's talk finally around. There's a lot of talk around. London is a trickier market at the moment, but actually the UK is a big place. I know we've spoken around, you feel that we need to build for everybody, not just, an investor or whatever. What do you think is going to be the difference between kind of the outlook on London and the outlook on the rest of the UK over the next couple of years? And where do you see it being better or booming more?
Well, I mean, the thing is that there's need everywhere. There's need in London. There's need outside of London. There's just such a gap. I mean, isn't it something like we're missing 4 million residences or something?
Yeah,
and
something crazy.
We need to build crazy amounts to keep up and blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Look, I absolutely adore London. I mean, you could take almost anywhere away from me, but I would not want London taken away from me. And it is just the most wonderful example of a civilized, large city. 47% of London is green, which is one of the reasons why you're never too far away from a green place. Yeah. And it's got such a wonderful, diverse mix of people. The key thing for me about London is let's just make sure that we enable housing to be built for all of society. It's really important. And let's make sure that we don't have the classic social housing project that's divorced from the rest of the area. And this project we're in at the moment, for example, I mean, I did have a fight with Tower Hamlets Council, which I lost, in that I wasn't arguing about the percentage of affordable housing. I wanted that percentage of affordable housing. We were going to be compliant. But I felt that young Londoners had a really difficult time. They do. They really 100%. Do. And I get really worried about, when nurses or junior doctors or primary school teachers or dental assistants or whatever have to travel an hour and a half a day to work, it's not healthy at all. It really isn't. And when a one-bedroom flat in London is like £550,000,
yeah.
It's just it really does genuinely worry me. Does genuinely worry me. Anyhow. Obviously, Tower Hamlets has a lot of people on the waiting list, and I completely sympathise with their issues. But they wanted large family homes here, and I wanted almost 3 times as many smaller young Londoner homes.
Yeah.
But they said to me, we don't have a policy for young Londoners, we only have a policy for families. And I delayed the project for a year arguing with them about this, and it just failed, unfortunately. But we need nuanced responses. Yes. But anyhow, we basically, the thing is it's integrated within this street. Shared, there's no such thing as a Paul door in my developments, and never will be. The roof terrace is shared by everybody. You need integrated societies. And on a macro level, if we don't provide affordable accommodation for more and more young Londoners, we're going to become a much more boring place full of boring white people like me who are overprivileged, living in London.
Yeah.
We've got to have a proper mix of young people. Yeah. And it's really dangerous for society not to have that. And we need to understand that there's, that we need appropriate solutions for appropriate things. So, for example, Spitalfields, where we are, I didn't think that it was great for families, personally. I mean, this is actually not one of the greenest parts of London. You're right next to Commercial Street, which is, I hate to even measure what the pollution levels are on that street. Yeah. And we've got a roof terrace, which is lovely, but there's no large space for kids to play in, etc. Yeah. So what I would be saying as a common sense thing is, let's make this for young Londoners where those things are less important. and then let's have family homes elsewhere. But sometimes policy dictates everything rather than common sense. And as I said, to come back, I have a lot of sympathy for the massive housing need and desperation in Tower Hamlets. But because there was no policy for young people, we didn't do that.
Yeah, that's
so
a shame.
London needs to be a vibrant ecosystem. It needs lots of different people living here, and we need to create the places for them. And it's a tough job.
And for them to be able to afford and live here. Yeah, I agree with that. Well, it's been really interesting. I'm going to close with a couple of quick fire questions, if that's all right. Number one, Australia or the UK?
That's a Sophie's choice, which I will not answer.
Good start. Okay. Best destination for a summer holiday?
What's a summer holiday?
A nice time away?
I don't take holidays.
Oh, okay.
No.
Nowhere? How do you spend your average Saturday?
I'm at home in Suffolk
Yeah.
with my dog on my lap.
Nice.
He gets very upset if I even touch my phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a no phone zone.
Yeah.
If you could take planning out of it, no planning at all, what's the wildest thing you'd build?
Well, I hope
And
I build nothing wild, because I don't really want to be known for building anything other than enabling places.
Okay.
It would be effectively having. Well, actually, could I ask a different question? Could I have permission to demolish rather than build?
Go on.
Yeah, because then I would just go around getting rid of so many ugly places that create dystopian societies. And this is going to be really unpopular with the liberal elite, but I would start with blowing up the Barbican.
Okay. And what would you replace it with?
I'd replace it with a mid-rise development and squares and stuff, and it would be much more aesthetically pleasing, not so expensive to run, and it would have a good proportion of affordable housing. One of the reasons why the Barbican works in terms of its concrete control, all this kind of stuff, is it's full of very, very expensive apartments now. It's a very expensive place to run, and it's constantly being looked after. So it's not exactly sustainable in that sense. If it was a mid-rise development with brick, it probably wouldn't need as much attention done to it.
Interesting. If you could own any property in the world, what would it be and why?
I think there's a great film that Nicole Kidman and Hugh Jackman called Australia. And it's by the Moulin Rouge director Baz Luhrmann. And like all this stuff, you have to sort of surrender to reality. But he creates this sort of view of faraway downs. And I'd like a sheep station in Australia with loads of land around me and sheep and hills and a beautiful thing with cockatoos flying about me, and be a sheep station.
Nice. And my final question, I've made this one up as we've been here, but teddy bears or houses?
I think there was a time where I was known as the teddy bear man, and it used to get a bit annoying. I think I would have to do.
You should have pressed on that a bit more.
I think, given that a teddy bear can bring joy to people, but a properly and affordable and well-designed home and community can create generational happiness, I'd have to go for home.
Fair enough. That's why you stuck with it then, is it? Thank you. It's been great to chat.
My pleasure.